In this video, we're going to talk about the last of the change detection techniques that I'm going to talk about. So this last one is known as the post-classification workflow or post-classification change detection. So in order to do this one, you need to have 2 classifications completed. So if I go, I'm going to open up 2 of my classifications. So I have this one, and I have this one. So you're going to need to open them up. It might take you a minute longer than me because I have everything ready to go for the video. And so you're going to see that I have not renamed my classes, but I have the same number of classes on both. They might look extremely different in my case, just because they're unsupervised classifications, as you can see. The different class numbers might actually be, like, so for example, this purple here is yellow here. This is why naming your classes is incredibly important, okay? So before you jump into this, make sure that you have changed the names. Maybe I'll just do one example for you here. So this one is, run this one here, and the blue is, if I go here, class 3, the blue is forest. It's actually a deciduous forest. And this would be something that you have, they're following Anderson land cover type, right? And then if I go to the other one, and let's go back here. So looking at this brown color. So this one is deciduous forest as well. Class 7. So I'm going to change that one really quick. And then I can see that this kind of tealy color is water. So I'm going to call class 8 ponds and lakes. And then if I look at this one, I have the green. So this one here. Oh, I named it the wrong one. 2020. This is class 8. Okay. I'm typing too fast, so everything's jumping around. Class 8. And I said the green, which is class 2. There's that. So if I turn this one off and go back down to this one, that's where I can rename the class 8. Make sure that you don't have any spelling errors between them, and the capitalization is the same, and spacing is all the same, everything else, right? So I'm just going to use those 2 as my examples, just because I haven't renamed them properly. But make sure that you have renamed all of your classes to match Anderson land cover type. And if you had, for example, crop 1 and crop 2, make sure they kind of relate, right? So make sure that crop 1 is the same as crop 1 in the other year. So just watch that so that the terminology is all the same. You can also do this with a, in terms of, well, no, sorry, you can't do this any other way. You can also do this with your unsupervised classification. This is unsupervised, I guess, but if you have a supervised classification, that's actually better than the kind of the chaos that you're seeing here. So if you've applied your supervised classification to 2 images, then you can apply it here. And you'll see it probably makes a lot more sense because you can like match the colors, you can make it look very much the same. So what we're going to do is go up to the toolbox, and we're going to type in temporal, and that doesn't happen. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to classification, change detection. I lied. Change detection, I'm thinking classification right now because I'm looking at classes. So if we go to change detection, I want you to go to the thematic change workflow. So we have 2 times. So time 1 in the series is my 2013 data, so March 2013. Time 2 in the series is my newer time, so I'm going to use that one. These ones have to be the classification images. Don't go to the other stuff, like for example in your change detection stack or anything like that. If you don't use your classification images here, then it's going to give you an error. So we hit next. And sometimes it allows you to click this box, sometimes it doesn't. So if you can click it, I suggest it, because then it's not going to include the areas that have not changed, right? And then it's only going to look at the ones that, oh look, it changed classes. So important concept there. So we hit next. And then it goes through and it starts identifying stuff. So that was actually really quick processing. Just go like this. And this is actually my change detection, but look at how many classes I have, right? So I have 80 classes. But if I pull this open, so this area that looks like white says that it stayed ponds and lakes and ponds and lakes. So it stayed the same. Anything that shows up in this teal color looks like it went from ponds and lakes to deciduous forest. So we're hoping that that is an error in your own classification rather than in the actual ground. But otherwise what it's doing is going to say class 1, and it's going to show me all the changes from class 1. And I can turn these all on and off and look at them individually, or I can look at them one at a time. It looks like my dominating color is this kind of teal color that's up here. And so if I can find that in here, it looks like this one. So let's see if I can turn the rest of these off and not look at that one. So we seem to be doing okay so far. So that might be what it is. So if you have your true color underneath, you're going to actually see the true color. Right now I've got a classification image under, so that's why it looks funny. But as I go through, I could turn these all off, and I could try to figure out what those classes are. If I've, like in this case, because I haven't renamed them. Otherwise, when you rename them, that you're supposed to rename them, you will know what that class has changed from. So for example, if this white area actually was like ponds and lakes to dry, bare land, then I know that I'm going to see less water in that region, right? So it looks at specifically at all of the classes and how do they stay the same, do they change, have they moved, and if you keep the names correct, so it's got class 1 to class 1 because it wouldn't let me check that one spot, but if it stayed as class 1 to class 1, then it's going to be colored in that way. So thematically, it tells me what matches and what doesn't. So here I'm just going to smooth my data a little bit so I can finish it up. I'm not, if you can imagine what the vectors data set's going to look like, it'll be crazy. So if I go here, you see change detection. So this is my change detection, and this is my post classification change detection of 2013-2020. Finish it up, and I have my final result. So keep in mind that this is a very complicated type of result that you can see here, because you're going to have every single class. So if you have 8 classes, you're going to have, like what I have here, you're going to end up with 80. So that's post-classification workflow. And I'm going to emphasize that the importance of this one is if you are looking at how has a landscape changed over time, and you thematically are using the name, it is probably the one that you need the most. It just means that your classes need to be named correctly. And the reason I'm really emphasizing that you probably need this one the most is because I'm going to use an example of flooding. So if you're doing a flooding one, what went from dry ground, like dry bare ground to a pond? Then those of you who are doing like burn scars, what does that look like? Do we have senescent vegetation, or did it move from senescent vegetation to like a lush vegetation? Is there like young trees in there, or did it stay that way? Um, what's some other ones? Did it go to grassland, for example? If you have changes of pasture to crop, do you see that difference? Do you see changes of air pollution from one region to another? So this is a qualitative way to interpret your data, but it allows you to put it into words that normally your client will be able to understand. So I do not want you kind of throwing this out because you think, oh, it's just too much work. I want you to really think, is this what I'm trying to do? Because you're going to choose these based on the value that it's going to give to your projects. Do you need to quantify it? If you need to quantify it, you would use the temporal differencing or the temporal ratios. If you just need to have a quick reference and the right function memory insertion is okay, but you really can't name it. You can't put an actual thematic name to it. All you can say is that you can just see higher values in a certain band than others. And finally, then if you're looking at, for example, overall changes, sometimes the multi-temporal classification is beneficial. So that wraps up the change detection and how to do them in Envy. So good luck with your projects, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in your changes.